and welcome to the second vlog in the All About Austen read-along. I'm Kira and I am hosting the All About Austen read-along, which I'm very, very excited about. For anyone that isn't aware, it is a read-along that is surprisingly all about Jane Austen and specifically about reading all of her 6 completed novels in publication order. So we started last month in August, which feels like a lifetime ago now, with Sense and Sensibility, and now moving on to our September pick, which is of course the wonderful, the beloved and her most popular novel, Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice is a reread for me. I read this book I think like 3 years ago now, probably sometime around 2018, not long after I graduated from university, and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't in love with it, not in the same way that I have been with some of her other novels, and so I'm very excited to reread it, return to it with fresh eyes, because this was the second ever Jane Austen novel that I read. I read Persuasion at university and then this one not long after. And then I read and totally fell in love with things like Northanger Abbey, Sensibility and my ultimate favourite, Emma, and that kind of completely transformed my perspective on Jane Austen, and I think now I'm going to go back into this one with a much greater appreciation of her writing and in particular her humour, which I know is something that people really love about this one in particular of all of her novels, but I'm really excited to return to it with fresh eyes and hopefully appreciate it even more, because while I enjoyed it, I didn't fall in love, and I'm hoping that this time maybe I will. Now, I mentioned at the start of my Sense and Sensibility vlog that I would kickstart each reading vlog in this series by showing you each book that I own of that particular novel, if that makes sense. So all of the editions of Pride and Prejudice that I have is this particular situation. So we of course have this one, which is the one that I'm going to be reading from. This is, I think, my mum's old copy, and it is from the year... maybe we don't know. I can't actually find a publication date in here. Well, it's from quite a while ago. The pages are quite worn and tattered, but it is my newest version, I think, bar one that's kind of a special edition, but we'll get to that in a second. So this is my reading copy of Pride and Prejudice. Next up is a beautiful vintagey edition, which I found in a second-hand bookshop. No? Come on. Okay, that's the front. Now look at the back, look at the side. It's so pretty, I really want you to see it. There we go. I think that's focused now. Very pretty. There we go. Hope that was worth it. Not quite convinced that it was, but that is the second copy I have of Pride and Prejudice. Next up is one that I'll be sharing in each of these videos because Jay got me a full collection of Jane Austen novels for my birthday. It's this one, it printed in 1960. I love it, it's so cute, and I'm so glad to have like a full Jane Austen collection. And then the final one was a gift, I believe from my friend Carolyn at Christmas time, and it was this Pride and Prejudice Cookbook with Martha Stewart. So it is the novel featuring recipes for modern tea time treats, which I just thought was such a cute concept. So each of them has like a little biscuit as like the header, and then there are various recipes in and amongst the novel. So it's just a really cute, fun one. Probably won't ever read from this copy because it's so big and bulky, but it's just like a fun little collector's edition to have on my shelves. So with that said, those are all of the editions I own of Pride and Prejudice, haphazardly piled together there, and I'm very excited to be rereading this novel, though I must make a confession. Pride and Prejudice is the September pick, but today is the 1st of October. Shoot me, please don't. I'm really sorry. I'm a terrible host. I'm always so behind on book club picks, and I try my best, but I don't succeed, you know, as Coldplay say, and it's just not ideal. However, the live show for this one isn't until the 8th of October, so I have officially got 1 week in which to reread Pride and Prejudice. and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing this weekend. I'm going to be trying to bash through as much of this novel as possible. I'm also going to London this weekend for my sister's birthday, which means I'll have a couple of long train journeys in which to do a little bit more reading, and I'm really quite confident because I know it's going to be a fun, quick and easy read that I've read before, I'm familiar with the story, and we're just going to get through it. So I will catch up with you later with thoughts on Pride and Prejudice, but for now, I'm heading to London, baby! Good morning! Oh my god. Wow, my voice just sounds so ridiculous. I'm just losing my voice so quickly. It's horrific. So I do apologise for that. But though I couldn't get a Pret yesterday on the way down to London because, well, they didn't have any chai latte, which is just ridiculous, there is a Pret just opposite our hotel. So me and Atane are just going to head out and get a hot drink, maybe some little bits for like a pre-breakfast breakfast, and then come back to the hotel for her presents. Woo! Well, hello lovely people, I am back from London, and not to be dramatic, but kind of back from the dead, to be honest. It's now Tuesday and I haven't actually physically spoken to you since Friday when I left for London, and that is because I was struck down by the common cold of all things. I mean, how embarrassing. I always pride myself on my titanium immune system. I literally never get ill, or when I do, the illness is kind of like yoo-hoo, and then I'm like pew, pew, no, get out of here, and it's gone within like a couple of hours. But last week, not the one for me. I got a sore throat, had a blocked nose. It was a sinus infection in the end is what it turns out I had. So it got my throat, and then it got my nose, then my whole face hurt. It got my ears, so I couldn't hear properly. I was all thrown off. It whacked me right out of equilibrium and I just felt horrific. But the main reason that I didn't speak to you wasn't because of how ill I felt, it was because of how ridiculous I sounded. My voice still isn't quite right, but you can at least hear words coming out, whereas the last couple of days I literally sound like, well, I didn't really sound like anything other than ridiculousness, because you couldn't really hear many of the words I was saying. My voice was all squeaky, kind of sounded like a 12-year-old boy, if that gives you any idea of what was going on for me. So London was fun, and it just was so unfortunate because I literally never get ill, and then of course I did the weekend when I was away from home, and you know, travelling never makes it any easier to be ill, and I think that probably made things worse. Yada yada yada. Long story short, this is probably very boring, but just wanted to fill you in because I was so excited to create the most fun London type of vlog, and that just hasn't happened because I didn't really feel up to it. But I'm home now and Pride and Prejudice is here alongside me. Now, because of how unwell I was feeling, I didn't really do a huge amount of reading over the weekend, but I am on chapter 8 of Pride and Prejudice, so quite a fair bit to go yet, but we are making a start, making progress, and the most important thing being that I am really enjoying it. This is my second time reading Pride and Prejudice, and I think I'm appreciating it more the second time around, and I'm sort of appreciating the nuances of Jane Austen's humour and just getting to know the characters and just kind of trying to enjoy it as much as possible. So at this point we've just been introduced to the Bennett family, the sisters, and kind of just like their coming out into society, and Mrs. Bennett and her desire to matchmake all of her daughters. So it's really fun just to get to know all of the characters and start seeing what's going on. And of course we have been introduced to the infamous Mr. Darcy, and I think this is probably a very like standard comment, but it's obviously amusing to me as a reader to recognise how similar Lizzy and Mr. Darcy are, because they are like very stubborn, a little bit cold with each other, kind of emotionless and just like set in their ways, and they both judge and dislike one another despite being very, very similar to each other, which I just think is really, really funny. And aside from that, it's just interesting to see like how all of the characters are described. I feel like Jane Austen's humour is definitely coming out more in this one than it did in Sense and Sensibility, and I feel like there's already more refinement in this novel than there is in that one. Like, it feels already more put together and like, I don't know, like well thought out, well targeted, and just I'm enjoying it a lot. There was an interesting one about the two younger sisters and I can't find it. It was basically saying that they were like empty-headed and needed to amuse themselves by going out on trips to town because they literally haven't got anything else going on in their head, and I just thought it was very, very funny. Well, you'll have to take my word for it, but it is funny and I'm enjoying it. So it is now Tuesday, and this evening after, well, I finished work for the day, of course, and now that I have, I'm planning to read a bit of Pride and Prejudice and then do a little bit of Tuesday evening baking. Tuesday night is bake-off night and I really fancy a nice, cosy, warming, hearty bake-off snack. So I think I'm going to make me and Jay an apple crumble because, first of all, delicious, and second of all, literally so simple and easy to make, which is what I need for an evening bake where I don't have loads of time. So that is what I have going on today. I will catch up with you, hopefully sounding even more normal than I do right now, when I've read some more of Pride and Prejudice. This week is literally flying by. I do not know where time is going. That's quite a common thing for me to say, to be honest, so I should just get with the programme and accept that time goes faster than I would like it to. But nonetheless, it's Thursday. I don't know how that has happened, but Pride and Prejudice continues, and I'm very much enjoying this reread of Pride and Prejudice, certainly more so than my first read of this novel a few years ago. I'm finding just a lot of it funnier, and I'm just enjoying the whole situation. Basically, it's just a really fun read. Have to say, I do not like Mrs. Bennett. I just feel like she's not very nice to Lizzy, and I think maybe parenthood was different back then. I mean, I'm sure it was in many ways, especially in the upper classes, but I just don't think it's very nice to have such an obvious disdain for one of your 5 children and like to make that very known to people. I just think she's quite rude. But Mr. Bennett, on the other hand, I do really like him, and obviously his favouritism of Lizzy kind of makes up for Mrs. Bennett and her not so nice behaviour. But there is one chapter, or section rather, that I just read that I just thought was so hilarious. So Lizzy has been propositioned by a character called Mr. Collins, and she has rejected him because she doesn't think that they would make each other very happy, which I think was unusual at the time because people made marriage decisions based on, you know, status, family connection, being related, but you know, lots of different situations would have resulted in marriage, and that was far more important than happiness, whereas Lizzy is like, no, I don't think we're a good match, soz, and not going to happen. But Mrs. Bennett has other ideas, so she tries to get her husband on side because she thinks that he can persuade Lizzy to marry Mr. Collins. So she says, oh, Mr. Bennett, you're wanted immediately. We are all in an uproar. You must come and make Lizzy marry Mr. Collins, for she vows that she will not have him, and if you do not make haste, he will change his mind and not have her. So she's obviously very worried that she's got 5 daughters to marry off and she needs to get it done pronto because, you know, if they miss opportunities, they might not come round again. And she then threatens that if Lizzy doesn't accept this marriage proposal, that her mum will never talk to her again. So Mrs. Bennett is like, either you marry this guy or I'm never going to speak to you again. And so Mr. Bennett, who is hilarious, says, an unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do. And I just think that's hilarious, and I just think, go Mr. Bennett, we love to see it. So I'm currently on chapter 24 of this novel. I've still got quite a lot left to go, but I'm really enjoying the progress and just the reading experience in general. I've been reading a bit slower than I had expected to, or rather hoped to, because this week Jay and I started watching Squid Game, which, if any of you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It's on Netflix. It is amazing. It is a Korean Netflix original, and we're watching in the Korean version with an English subtitle. You can watch it with an English dub, but that sounds ridiculous and awful, and I just think unless you actually hear the delivery and the emotion of the actual actors that originally spoke the lines, you just don't quite get the same experience. So I would highly recommend watching it. And also, I usually really struggle with attention span when it comes to TV shows, but watching a TV show where I have to read subtitles is actually keeping me so much more engaged. So if any of you guys also struggle with an extremely short attention span, then I would recommend that because it helps to keep me focused. So that has been taking up a lot of my focus, time, energy, and just bandwidth for entertainment, but Pride and Prejudice is a close second, and we are watching the final episode of Squid Game tonight, which means that following that I will be all yours, Jane Austen, so just you wait. Good morning guys, so it is currently just before 6 AM on a Saturday morning, and Jay and I are just about to head out to the gym, but because it's Saturday that means that it is also the day of the Pride and Prejudice live show, and as you can probably tell from my lack of updates yesterday, I haven't finished the book yet, but I am getting close, but time is not of the essence, and because of that I want to just try and maximise my reading throughout today as much as possible. So whilst I'm at the gym, I am also going to be listening to the Pride and Prejudice audiobook. I downloaded on Audible the full Jane Austen collection, which has all 6 of her completed novels, each with a full cast audiobook narrated by a famous actress. So the Pride and Prejudice one is obviously full cast, like each of the characters are played by a different person, but then the narrator's voice is Claire Foy, who I love in The Crown. She's just incredible. So I'm going to be listening to the Pride and Prejudice audiobook whilst I'm at the gym, just to try and keep my progress going. Then when I get back, I'll be doing some more physical reading, and I think I should be in a position to finish by hopefully about lunchtime, which gives me plenty of time before the live show. So I will catch up with you after the gym once I've done some more reading, and let's do it. Come on, Pride and Prejudice. Now, of the reading that I did yesterday, we're starting to sort of get to the bit now where there is a little bit of a spark between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. his feelings are starting to become more clear. I don't entirely buy it because I'm like, if you like her that much, why were you so rude to her? But just going with it because it's Jane Austen, and if she says it, then it must be true. But then with Elizabeth, I think possibly because she's the perspective that we're reading from, it's easier to understand her frame point. She made a judgment on Mr. Darcy based on his behaviour towards her, which seemed rude and cold, and then she used that initial interaction to then frame everything that he did and possibly be a little bit too harsh about his other behaviours. And now that she's learned some contradictory information to what she believes about him, she's kind of having to unpick all of her beliefs and prejudices and start to sort of develop a new, more nuanced view of him as a person. So it's really interesting to kind of see how it's not like a magical love at first sight scenario, it's actually like a slow burn romance built on like a mutual understanding and like a very similar personality type, which I think is really interesting. So that is where I'm at right now, going to the gym, gonna listen to lovely Claire Foy tell the story, and then I will catch up with you later. So it turns out that this audiobook is incredible, and I'm so glad that I decided to listen to it while I was at the gym this morning. First of all, it was just a really entertaining way to spend my gym session, so can't complain there. But second of all, and probably more importantly, it was so helpful in terms of reading productivity, because I spent the whole hour while I was at the gym listening to the audiobook, and I am now so close to the end. I think I only have 3 chapters left to finish this morning, so I'm well on the way to my goal of finishing the book this morning, and it was just such an enjoyable listening experience. I obviously had read the entirety of the rest of the book just with the physical copy, so I hadn't heard any of the voice actors or Claire Foy as the narrator yet, but I love how it's been done. There are little bits of music in there, and the characters are obviously each voiced by a different voice actor. We have this incredible narrative voice of Claire Foy, and I just think the way that it all brings it together is just so good. It kind of like intersects the bridge between like book and film adaptation in a really interesting way, and I really enjoy audiobooks in general, but I think this might be the first ever full cast audiobook that I've listened to, so it's a really interesting and unique experience that I am very much enjoying, so I'm so glad that I decided to listen to it. And also, just for anyone who isn't aware of the full Jane Austen collection audiobook on Audible, I came across it when I was just searching for, I think, Sense and Sensibility, and it has each of her 6 completed novels in one audiobook collection, so the whole thing is like 40 hours long or something ridiculous like that. But it's amazing because they're obviously all narrated by these famous actresses, they're all full cast audiobooks, which is really, really great. And because it's in one big collection, you get 6 novels only using 1 credit, which I just think is such a great deal. So if any of you are interested in listening to some Jane Austen audiobooks, I recommend checking this out on Audible, because this is the first one that I've actually listened to, but I can now confirm very, very good, and I'm definitely going to be listening to more of them going forward. So, like I said, I only have about 3 chapters left of this novel now until the end, but Jay and I are just heading out for a Saturday morning coffee, and then when I come home I'm going to sit down and finish the last few chapters of Pride and Prejudice, which, might I add, I think just gets better and better the closer to the end you get. I have enjoyed the entire reading experience, but I do think it starts off a bit slow and it takes me a while to warm up to these characters, whereas in some of her other novels I really like the main character straight away, whereas in this one it definitely takes me longer to warm up, but by the end I just think it is definitely her most romantic work and just a really lovely reading experience, so I cannot wait to finish it later on this morning. And that is Pride and Prejudice done and dusted. I loved this reread so much more than I expected to. I for some reason had like a really negative perception of Pride and Prejudice in my mind. I don't know if I just expected it to not be as good as everyone says it is. It's still not my favourite Jane Austen. That spot is still held by Emma, and I'm convinced that nothing will knock that book off its pedestal. But I'm just going to check Goodreads and see what I actually rated this book the first time that I read it, because I don't think I was very kind. Pride and Prejudice. Oh, okay, I was more fair than I thought. I gave it 4 stars last time, and that was on the 23rd of August 2018, and this time around I think I'm going to give it 5 stars, because comparing this now so directly to Sense and Sensibility, her first novel, I think that that novel obviously had 2 protagonists, Eleanor and Marianne, and I think one of my main criticisms of that book in terms of the like structural quality of the work was the fact that sometimes that balancing of multiple characters and multiple protagonists was a bit clumsy and just felt a bit forced. Whereas in this novel we obviously have Lizzy as the main character, but there are also lots of other things going on. She is one of 5 sisters, there are loads of different characters, and all of these sisters have their own romantic pursuits, and the difference between Sense and Sensibility and this one, to see how much more like natural the balancing of lots of different characters and plots is in this novel, it was just really, really impressive to see. And I feel like you could see a definite just like evolvement, or evolution is the word, of her writing style and just her ability to maneuver the like process of writing lots of different things all at once and developing characters equally without sort of like pushing someone off to the side in favour of like developing one character and then pushing that character off in favour of bringing the other one back, because that is a little bit how Sense and Sensibility felt. But really, really enjoyed this one. There's a quote towards the end that I think kind of sums up why I enjoyed it so much in the end, and that is Jane says to Elizabeth, "Will you tell me how long you have loved him?" And Elizabeth says, "It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began." And I just think there's such an authenticity in the way that the romance in this novel happens that you don't even realise as well like how invested you've become in it until you're like, wow, I'm so happy that they're together now. So I really, really enjoyed this one, bumping it up to 5 stars, and I'm so, so glad to have had the opportunity to reread this book, give it another try, and just like, you know, improve my experience of Pride and Prejudice, which is of course her most popular, most well-known, most well-loved novel. And I'm glad that I can now say that I am a big, big fan of this one too. So tonight is actually, as I mentioned, the live show for this one, so I'm so excited to be talking about this book with Meg and Jess. I'll link their channels down below, but by the time this vlog goes live, the live show will already have been up, so you can go and check out all 3 of our thoughts and the discussion that we've had. But I'm so happy to have finished this book now. So the next one on the list, which is officially our October pick, is Mansfield Park, and that is the only Jane Austen novel that I haven't read yet. So I'm very excited to share the vlog for that one and dive into a book which I literally know nothing about. But thank you so, so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on Pride and Prejudice, and I will see you next time.